Hello, I'm Jorge Gestoso. Welcome to a new program. On today's show, how the coronavirus pandemic has been politicized in this electoral year in the US. Our guest, Emilio Viano, political analyst and professor emeritus of American University. Emilio Viano, a warm welcome to the program.
Thank you for inviting me.
Emilio, how you see the response so far to the pandemic from the government of President Trump?
Well, I am with the experts, the doctors, the epidemiologists, those who work in the field, saying that it is an embarrassing disaster, the reply of the United States to the pandemic. Clearly, we were not prepared. And most of all, and this is the worst, is that the government, the federal government, did not want to admit that there was this problem, that it was serious, that it required emergency, urgent measures, and that did coordinate the response of the country in a unified, well-planned manner. I think that this has been the weakest point, the lack of coordination for part of the federal government. We have 50 states and then various other jurisdictions, the District of Columbia, Samoa, Puerto Rico, the Virgin Islands. We have almost 60 jurisdictions that cannot, each on its own, reply and organize a counterattack against the pandemic. Así que, so that it is absolutely necessary for the federal government to intervene and to coordinate. This was missing, and missing most of all because the president from the beginning didn't want even to admit that there was a problem and saw it as a nuisance. At one point he said that it would disappear miraculously one morning when we would wake up and it was gone. Because it doesn't thrive in higher temperatures and summer is coming. And some people believed it. So in that respect, I agree with the expert who say that it is embarrassing that a country like the US that prides itself in being a can-do type of culture where nothing stops Americans from solving a problem positively to find itself in these very dire straits with hundreds of thousands of cases and of dead people.
There's a new recent Reuters poll that indicates that 55% of Americans disapprove the handling of President Trump of the pandemic, and in the virtual Democratic candidate Joe Biden says that the response of Trump to the pandemic was, quote unquote, almost criminal. What do you think?
Well, certainly, as we already said, there is no question that the president did not want to invest seriously his time, his attention, the resources of the country to fight the coronavirus. He didn't even act as a unifier, as the father of the nation, as someone who can bring the nation together in a moment of tragic death and illnesses. And we saw it even in the way in which he never proposed a serious period of condolences, of thinking about the people who died, thinking of those who lost loved ones, and maybe set aside 2-3 days of national mourning, and even lead maybe, if not a religious, at least a ceremony somewhere in Washington, maybe uniting the country in a moment of silence, thinking of all those who died because of the coronavirus. We didn't have any of that because he didn't want to admit that this was happening. And certainly Biden is in agreement with all the experts in characterizing the response as weak, ineffective, and not well coordinated.
President Trump was pushing, do you remember better than anyone else, that the confinement should have to finish, and he was pushing to reopen the economy, and there was a big discussion. He was pushing, and finally, especially the governors of his own Republican Party was opening the states earlier than the other ones. The fact is that as of today, more than half of the states of the country are showing significant increases on the cases and also hospitalizations. And there's agreement among the scientists that the COVID-19 is going to come back during the winter time. Question, Emilio, the worst is yet to come?
I'm in complete agreement, as the experts even today are discussing the spike in infections in many of the states, particularly those who refuse to take the epidemic seriously and where mostly Republican governors agreed with Trump to push the reopening of the state as quickly as possible. We shouldn't deny, of course, that the coronavirus has inflicted a tremendous economic loss to the United States that has put many businesses in very serious situations, particularly the smaller businesses. But unfortunately, just declaring victory when the virus is still there and is spreading is not going to improve the situation. There are other ways. And in that respect, the coronavirus has revealed the weaknesses of the American system when it comes to a situation like this, when there is no system prepared in advance that almost goes into effect automatically to assist people who lose their employment, businesses who lose their business, those who have to close their doors for months and have to survive. We don't have a system like that. And we should obviously think about it and develop it, because that is how we solve this problem, not by declaring that the virus is not there anymore when it is increasing in the impact that it has in many different states.
As we were talking about politicizing the response to the pandemic, President Trump has was always relating his quote unquote what he says that is a success with the economy. And as you were mentioning, confinement was meaning the stop of all the economic activity. As of today, close to 50 million Americans with no jobs, unemployment over 15%, the possibilities of a very rapid recovery is farther and farther. And that's exactly according to everybody who sees that from far, realizes that that's the desperation of President Trump to push to things to be open in order to see that the figures are going to get a little bit better in the next quarters, especially in the quarter close to the election. But there's something very clear, that his levels of popularity and acceptance are in free fall. According to Reuters, 13 points of advantage Biden against Trump. According to Trump's favorite TV news, Fox News, 12% of advantage of Biden against Trump. And what it's looking like is, given the fact that he realizes that his chances are less and less probable that he could be reelected, now he starts to talk about that in case of the coronavirus continues during the election period, people could go and vote by mail. So now he said that will be equivalent of a fraud. Is that an act of desperation?
Well, certainly the president is faced, from his point of view, with some very serious challenges. The coronavirus epidemic, to start with, then the Black Lives Matter movement to protest violence by the police in dealing particularly with minorities, that has really shaken up the country completely. And then, of course, also this economic crisis that is taking place in the country. He has certainly, if he wants to be reelected, tremendous obstacles to overcome. But the way he is going about it is not the correct one, because he simply adopts the attitude that the problem does not exist and we shouldn't even talk about it. And I don't even have to pay attention to it. When instead he should, because there are indeed millions of people that don't have a job. There are growing numbers of people infected in the hospitals. and at times dying. The movement against police violence continues because there are more and more episodes of police violence. And the president refuses really to take it seriously and address it adequately. So I think that Biden has a very good chance of winning the election and defeating Trump. The only big obstacle I see is for Biden to unify the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party is very much divided between a more leftist wing represented by younger representatives, particularly women, and a more conservative wing that don't agree with each other. And there is where I don't see yet Biden being able to unify. If he is not able to unify the party, he might lose this very unique opportunity to defeat Trump. And that, I think, is his biggest priority. Second, of course, is to run an effective campaign. And he has not really been tested yet with large rallies with supporters to convince them to vote for him. But all the elements for a victory are there. It is only a question of him to seize the opportunity and lead his campaign correctly, so that first he unifies the party, secondly demonstrate to the voters that he has the solutions and that he is capable, that he has what it takes, and thirdly, that he can effectively reply to an emergency situation like we are facing much better than Trump did.
The ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union, said in the past few days that was criticizing the decision of President Trump by an executive order to extend the stopping issuing certain type of visas for people to come to the U.S. And he says that is in order to protect from the American workers, from other people, from immigrants to take their jobs. And eventually he said that he was doing it to protect them from COVID-19. Immigration has always been one of the issues. To paint the immigrants as negative, as threatened, as something that you have to be afraid of. Is this decision, again, another part of throwing red meat to his base to try to convince him that he is the one who defends them from this world of enemies coming from overseas?
It is really ironic that these anti-immigrant measures are taken by someone who is the son of an immigrant mother, the grandson of an immigrant grandfather, who married an immigrant, and so on and so forth. In other words, someone who is first-generation American on the side of his mother, and who could really take pride in saying, this is the American dream. You can immigrate to this country and your son can become president, something that is basically impossible in the rest of the world. Instead, he has decided to make the immigrant the enemy of the people and exploits mercilessly this theme over and over again, even to the detriment of the country. Because, for example, by limiting very much the immigration, we are, for example, creating tremendous problems for many industries: the hospitality industry, the tourism industry, the agricultural farming industry, universities that need foreign students who often pay full tuition and are a great source of revenue, and so on and so forth. In other words, the country depends on immigration, particularly for the jobs that are not so well paying, that are not so attractive, that no one else wants to do. And it is really just a measure that it takes because indeed it pleases the ears of his supporters to present himself as their defensor, the one that is going to protect them, when in reality it is not that way, because in the end, we need immigrants to give the country the workers that it needs to function properly and to prosper.
Masks have become a political statement?
they have leaving the house with a mask or without a mask has become in this country a political statement. It is amazing when it should be commonsensical and also following the advice of the doctors, the epidemiologists, the experts that say if you are going public, protect others from you by wearing masks and appear in public as little as possible. And this is not what they want because the priority is the re-election and secondly, the economy in a wrong way. Namely, by saying, let's open, let's reopen, let's have people go to the bar, to the restaurants, to the movies, to the beach, as if this is a solution, when instead, as we already have seen, particularly in Florida, for example, it will create more and more cases of infection, illness, and even death, which has a negative impact on our economy and on the general status of the country.
Finally, Emilio, a vaccine is something that everybody in the world is waiting and expecting. And of course, President Trump is trying to sell the impression or the idea that it's being accelerated the process. Do you believe that something could happen before the election, that he could bring that as a big win and he's a savior?
Well, all the experts that I've listened to in recent days, even today, discussing this issue of the vaccine, say that it is just not possible to have a vaccine that fast. Some of them talk about, at best, to have it by summer of 2021. Even Dr. Fauci, who of course has to walk a tight line because he is, in a way, an official spokesman. He deals with the president, so he cannot contradict him too strongly, as said by the end of the year, so well past the election date. But many say it is not so easy to create an effective vaccine that works because it is a lengthy process, even if you put billions of dollars into it, particularly the testing, the collecting of the data, and then the analysis of the data and the adjustments that have to follow that analysis. So it is indeed, a dream that will not take place to have a vaccine very, very quickly. We have seen medication proposed by the president officially now even being declared in this country as ineffective and being, canceled as a possible medication for coronavirus. One that he particularly pushed as being effective has been now retired by the health authorities of the US as anything that can do anything for you if you have coronavirus and others. So it is not that easy to find a solution to all of this. And it is indeed another dream sold, almost like they used to say, selling snake oil in the 19th century when there were itinerant vendors selling medications that were supposed to be miraculous and did nothing for you. And it is a little bit like going back to the snake oil salesman selling people a cure that does not do anything for you and actually makes things for you worse.
Emilio Viano, thank you very much for joining us.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.